And you know what it makes me think of? You know, the Rabbi Akiva laughing, 4 rabbis going together to see the destruction of the temple and seeing a fox run out. And whilst the other rabbis are crying at the destruction, Rabbi Akiva is laughing. Right. And that's that key Vamoed bit. It's the why you laugh. Like, we're crying because he can't understand why they're crying. We're crying because it's destroyed and it's terrible. And he's laughing because he knows the second half of the story, the second half of whatever you want to call it, the prophecy, the story, or the story of our people, which is we will rebuild. It will be better.
That was Raymond Simonson discussing the song Fire Drill Fridays, which I wrote with a group of participants in a songwriting workshop I led for Limud North America's E-Festival back in 2020 at the outset of COVID. People told some stories, we connected it to the psalm, and the song is what came out of that. I'm Shep Rosenman. This is The Rest is Commentary, where we discuss what songs inspired by the Psalms, or Tehillim, inspire in my guests. Please support the podcast and me as an artist by sharing, liking, commenting, and subscribing on your favorite platforms. Raymond is the chief executive of JW3, London's big and bold flagship Jewish community and arts center. He spent more than 3 decades in Jewish education, youth work, and community leadership, teaching about Jewish history, identity, and creative ways of building Jewish life that actually feels vibrant and welcoming. He's written about innovative Jewish education and community engagement and brings a mix of serious learning, storytelling, and humor to his teaching. As founding CEO of JW3, he's helped turn it into one of the cultural cornerstones of British Jewish life. And on top of all that, he's also one half of the Rebbitzins Disco, the much-loved late-night act that remixes Jewish texts and ideas through blues, funk, hip-hop, and R&B. To find out more about Raymond or JW3, head to jw3.org.uk. And for me personally, Raymond is a dear friend and important mentor from whom I continue to learn so much. Raymond and I talked for this episode in the summer of 2023, before October 7th, and before the current wave of anti-Semitic attacks, arson against synagogues, and stabbings, may the victims heal, that took place in London and across the UK in the last couple of weeks. As you listen, I wanted to name my love and solidarity with Raymond, with JW3, and with the wider UK Jewish community in this painful time. In our conversation, we talk about youth movements and community as sources of resilience and hope, how music and social commentary can move people toward collective action, rereading traditional texts for our moment, and Rabbi Akiva laughing among the ruins, insisting on hope, joy, and connection even when so much feels broken, and so much more. Let's start off by listening to Fire Drill Fridays.
Poor one's prayer, vanishing smoke. Layoffs, Black Friday, golden cows. Throw the charred bones far away. Diamonds, coal, oil cut in half. I got arrested with Jane Fonda, wearing my puffy red coat. I got arrested with Jane Fonda. Clean air and water's the antidote. Prayer dries up like blood in the rain. God faints, pours forth the troubled day. Sees girls lugging jugs of water. Laughs among the ruins, it'll be okay. I got arrested with Jane Fonda, wearing my puffy red coat. I got arrested with Jane Fonda. Clean air and water's the antidote. It is time now for me to stand up, bring some comfort. I said joy is coming. Won't hide my face, won't hide my voice. Girls will solve the Goldbach conjecture. drunk from a cup. Deck of a boat, heart pounds yearning. I see a wind farm off in the distance. A bending shadow slowly turning. Yeah, I got arrested with Jane Fonda, wearing my puffy red coat. I got arrested with Jane Fonda. I got arrested. We need some antidotes. We need some freaking antidotes.
I'm really excited to see you.
Same here. Same here.
Any transatlantic video call still excites me like as if it was the first time, you know. There's my friend in LA and I can see him and hear him and it's just wonderful.
But at the moment, it's sunny in both places because you are in London.
It is, but a mutual friend of ours was here from LA today and messaged me, was here with her family in the building, Ruthie Rottenberg.
Oh my God.
And I was out in a meeting and said, I'll be there like in an hour. I'll see you. She was here. We have the beach here. But by the time I got here, she's messaged me to say, it's too cold for us. We've gone. But she told me to send her love. I said, I was seeing you later. And she said to send her love.
Oh, that is so lovely. Ruthie was such an important part of my life in a similar way that you are. So you and Ruthie come to me the same way through the Limud movement. You were an early trainer. In fact, I think you were at the first 3 or 4 trainings that I participated in, both in Los Angeles and in the UK.
Right.
And you came to our first conference.
And I came out also and stayed in your home over Shabbat and for a few days to work with the leadership team of Limud LA. And I think it was around 2008. In my mind, it was something like that.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Feels like it was somewhere around there, which was the first and only time I've been in LA and was whisked around different people's houses over Shabbat to speak to different groups of people and then trained. Was that whole training day, was that at your house or Linda's house?
We split it because one of the things that we learned in the Limud context is the importance of diversity, and not only diversity of background and ethnicity, but diversity of geography, which is a big issue in Los Angeles.
Of course.
I don't know ultimately if the diversity of geography thing stuck in Los Angeles, but I do think that Limud LA really changed the landscape and how Jews of all stripes interacted. I shouldn't say all stripes. We never really made our way into the Haredi, the ultra-Orthodox community, except here and there. It never really took, though we had a whole bunch of ultra-Orthodox participants over the years. Be that as it may, I'm just kind of connecting the dots. Ruthie was the first executive director of Limud LA, and she really helped us make it as successful as it was in the early years. And I have tremendous Hakaras Hatov gratitude for her.
I'll always be grateful for Limud LA existing because, without it sounding too cheesy, that's where we met, and it was through Limud and the fact you were involved with setting up Limud LA, and that's where I met you, and that's where I met Esther Kostanovich, who I still remain friends with. And if I got nothing else out of that relationship with Limud LA, and there was certainly more, I would say Dayenu to 2 wonderful friendships from people, not who I just love, but I have learned so much from and with over the years in different settings. And now in a new setting through song. This is a different one for me. I've never been able to play an instrument, not since violin, aged 8. You know, once you're forced to play the violin, growing up where I grew up, you don't really get into playing an instrument. You get rid of it as quick as you can. But I've always loved music, and music has been a huge part of my life. I love those that are about lyrics, you know, so the kind of folk tradition where lyrics are most important. And I love those that are about the music, the kind of funk and soul and, you know, reggae. And I'm a huge kind of vinyl nerd and have a lot of vinyl at home. And my kind of secret passion on the side outside of my Jewish community work was playing, sort of DJing, and I'll say DJing in the loosest possible sense, amateur DJing at parties and things like that. And then once those worlds crossed over, and I found myself every year at Limud, kind of the last night sort of party with the wonderful Jacqueline Nichols, playing this thing that she came up with the name the Rebbe Zisko, and she put these beautiful texts and artwork together, and we both DJ'd, and the idea was to try and bring something, really lift the soul through the music.
It's directly related to what seeking to explore here. You know, when I was growing up, I didn't even ask the question and we're already in it. I love that. When I was growing up, the study of Torah was as fusty as the study of social studies and math and all the stuff that, like, as a kid, I didn't really have an interest in. I first got into it not for the sake of study, but for the sake of spiritual exploration about halfway through my kind of year, my gap year in Israel. The study, the texts, the immersion of that was a byproduct of the desire for spiritual experience. Music was a big part of it in that Saturday nights there would be a kumsitz, you know, a sing-along. When Rav Goren, who was then the chief rabbi in Israel, came to our school, there was a band that kind of made it celebratory. Right. But the way you and Jacqueline have taken texts and art and combined it with music, it's an overall experience that, even if you're not paying attention to the text, creates a spiritual experience. So you've done it in a way that I think regular people can relate to. And that's what I think Limud does. That's what I think Pardes and Hadar are seeking to do, and a variety of other institutions. And that's what I'm trying to do here. I'm writing songs that are coming from my heart in hopes that it speaks to your heart. You know, Dvarim sheyotzim min halev nichnasim el halev. Right? Like, it may or it may not, but at the end of the day, whether you like the song or don't like the song, whether you were moved by it or not, I hope it at least kind of bubbles up some thoughts or some feelings. So the question I always start off with is, in the same way that I was inspired to write the songs by Tehillim, the Psalms, I offered my song to you as a gift, and we all know that gifts are sometimes loved and sometimes loathed. The question is, what did the song inspire in you? Love, loathing, questions, commentary, hope, hatred, whatever it is, and we will kind of go from there and see where the conversation goes, because I have no idea where it's going to go.
So first of all, thank you for the gift. It's the gift of music is always wonderful. And actually, the thing it most gave me was question. Like, that's what inspired me. I had, thoughts, and part of it is the style of it, this cut-up style, and maybe we'll come back to that. It triggered curiosity in me. Like, okay, what's this about? What's the story here? Because I love the story in a song. I love the story in the classic Motown songs where there's a story, or the songs of Billy Bragg. There's a story there, and I want to know who the characters are. And, I'm a lover of literature, so this is another piece of literature. So I wanted to know, who is this person? What are they protesting about? What's moving them? So it was curiosity and questions. I was visualizing it. It was quite a visual one, this one. Very descriptive, very visual, and cinematographic, I guess. One confession is, in all my years, and I've worked 30 years in the Jewish community, in the field of informal Jewish education and community building, and I have studied lots of text and lots of types of things and taught. But actually, Tehillim is one of those ones I'm less au fait with Tehillim. Right? There's, the one or two.
I'm sorry, for those who don't know what au fait means, could you...
to translate from the English, I mean the French. I'm sort of less familiar, less comfortable, it's not something that I have as much experience in. I've said Tehillim when people have asked to say Tehillim for someone that's sick, and I'm one of those people that will, be sent that WhatsApp or be asked to, and I feel it's the right thing to do. At the same time, my belief isn't that by me saying Tehillim, someone is going to be healed or cured or feel better. I've said Tehillim for too many people that have passed away. But I totally get that it gives comfort and maybe hope to the person that's asked me to say it. So I'm going to say Tehillim and tell the person I've said it, because I know that means something to them. It's about community and being part of something. And if they believe that's going to help, because good luck to them. But I'm not engaging in the text of it in the same way. So this was one of the first times entering into that style, the particular style of how Psalms are written, which is not the kind of text I grapple with as much. So it's the Tehillim themselves, or this Psalm 102, already just reading the Psalm was like, okay, I've got to get my head in and my eyes back in the game of that. And then the lyrics to the song, Oh, sorry, I should say the song itself. I loved the sound. The starting point was the sound of your voice in it, a different style than I was maybe expecting. And that made me want to read the lyrics, which got me curious, which then meant, of course, I'm then going to read the source text and go, okay, what's the relationship between these two things? And that just led to all sorts of questions, which hopefully we'll kind of have some conversation around.
Well, okay. So first of all, I already have a lot of reactions. I want to start with this one. So what do you think the story of the song is? Because what I think, honestly, as the writer, once I write it and present it to you, it's as much yours as it is mine. I know what I intended. I may not know what you interpret. And maybe that kind of ambiguity was intended. Maybe it wasn't. So I'm curious to hear what you think.
Okay. So the picture in my mind was, and maybe it's partly because of the pictures I'm seeing all the time from Israel at the moment that my friends are sending me and posting, which is of protest. And I'm someone from maybe my late teens who was quite political, 16, 17 onwards, ideological, political. And I would go to demonstrations and marches. It wasn't a family thing. It was my Jewish youth group, kind of my friendship circle and some of my school friends. And there were certain things here. It was a particularly conservative government here. There were certain things, the poll tax riots, people remember. Well, by the time it became a riot, I was running the other way and gone. But at the beginning, it was a protest demonstration. A lot of the anti-fascist marches. That was the particular thing that our group were into, going along to these anti-fascist, anti-racist demonstrations. There was some when I was a bit younger, which were kind of the Soviet Jewry stuff in a particularly Jewish context. So I've always been, and even a couple of months ago, I was at Parliament Square by the Houses of Parliament with lots of my Israeli and British Jewish friends protesting going on in Israel at the moment and making my banner and holding it up and all of that. So as soon as I was reading this, I was straight drawn into, here's someone putting themselves on the line, prepared to get arrested with Jane Fonda, right? Which I love. And that image, I want to know why your red coat is puffy, because her red coat is very stylish. The Jane Fonda red coat that she wears in all of which I assume was this reference that she wears in all the photos every time she's protesting or arrested. And of course, the thing that I assume this was about, what's the protest about? It's probably one of the biggest issues of our age, which is the climate emergency. Yeah. That's what I felt this was all about. This is about the climate emergency and images like charred bones, clean air and water being the antidote. It's the thing that at the moment we take for granted. And it's the thing that Greta Thunberg and others have been warning us that we absolutely can't take for granted, right? And that's why these fire drill Fridays have come up, right? This isn't a fire drill. This is a real emergency. Yeah. And I got that sense, felt a real sense of urgency in some of that language. And I wondered if part of that was the cut up style as well. It was jarring, it wasn't flowing. It was words or sentences and then another sharp sentence rather than long passages of poetry style. And that made it jarring and made it feel urgent.
That's awesome. So first of all, I think you got it 1,000%. It's not
few.
It's not so much a story as vignettes with the verses being the commentary. And the way the song came about, it's appropriate that you chose this one because it was written by a group of Limudniks right at the beginning of the pandemic. Limud North America or Limud I think it was Limud North America organized Zoom conference in May. So I did a songwriting session for that. I proposed using Cut Up because Cut Up is disjointed, and we were in a deep moment of feeling disjointed then. But yet, we were using a technique that is disjointed to connect to each other and to connect to topics. And so I felt like it was trying to kind of make whole out of that which is broken.
How very Jewish.
Totally. And very Japanese.
I'm very Japanese, yeah.
This is actually a long Tehillim. So I took excerpts of language that I found interesting. And not only language that I found interesting, but concepts. A poor man's prayer. And back then I wasn't necessarily paying attention to the gender of language, even though I should have been. A poor man's prayer when probably today they faint and pour forth their plea before Adonai. I'm like a great owl in the wilderness, an owl among the ruins. I ate ashes as if it was bread and mixed my drink with tears. A slanted growing shadow, like grass I dry up. For my days have vanished like smoke and my bones are charred like a hearth. all of that was already in the Tehillim, and even using the language from that captures the essence of the Tehillim, which talks about how poor we are as human beings, and no matter what, like, we're suffering. But at the end of the day, Ata takum terachem Tzion, ki et lechen nakiva moed, you, Lord, will arise and comfort Zion. So hold on a second. Now that you've brought up that melody, did you hear that melody in the song?
Oh, that's a good question. Now, if you played it again, if I listened to it again, it was only after I'd listened to it and I was then looking, I got to the psalm last. I listened and it was the music that I got to first. Then I got the lyrics next. And it was only after that I went to, it was kind of disjointed, I realize now. And as soon as I was like, I don't know this one. I'm 102. Do I know it? I haven't come across. And I went, hold on a minute. Hold on a minute. I know that. I know Kiva Moed. We all know Kiva Moed, right? Right. And particularly, I guess I think it's Carlebach, that nigun
melody,
that particular melody. Right, it's a really famous one. I associate that with sitting around a table with a bunch of kind of yeshiva boys, or or at some kind of event, or maybe even a wedding, a tish, or a Sheva Bracha, one of the celebrations after a wedding or whatever, and people really getting into that and singing that. I hadn't thought about it in the context of, I hadn't gone back and listened and thought about it in the context of your song.
So hold on, I may get myself in trouble with the Carlebach estate by mentioning this, or with people who have an issue with Rabbi Carlebach,
right,
despite his musical legacy. But that song, Kiva Moed, because good things are coming, I'm loosely translating.
Yeah.
And it's an aspiration. And this song is about the shit that we're in now with climate change. Doesn't mean that there aren't great things. You know, my kids are doing great. I have a successful practice with a great group of people. And most of the people that I work with, both on kind of my side of the table and even on the other side of the table, they're lovely, warm. It's great. I get to have conversations with you and Clive Lawton and Peter Himmelman, and coming up is Ellis Delaney and Mayim Bialik and Esther Kostanowitz and all sorts of just fabulous, not only Ma'ayanim HaMitgabrim, fountains of creativity, but Bor Suds as well. They're deep cisterns of knowledge, all of you. So, there's nothing bad. Okay, there's a WGA strike and that sucks. Okay. Be that as it may. But, this climate change, that really sucks.
Yeah.
But yet, consistent with the spirit of Jewish theology and rabbinic thought, notwithstanding the crap, we just looked at that text, a poor person's prayer, but yet it ends in Kiva Moed, because good stuff's coming. So we structured this song the same way. And I probably would structure it differently now, because the bridge is supposed to bridge you into joy. And maybe it does in a bending shadow slowly turning. The arc of the moral universe is long. Maybe. But I'd probably rewrite this. But the chorus, now back to the specific issue why I asked the question. Tatakum. It is time now, Tirachem Tzion, for me to stand up. Ki et lechenena, bring some comfort. Kiva Moed, joy is coming.
I love that.
Atatakum, don't hide my face. Tirachem Tzion, or hide my voice. Girls will solve the Goldbach's conjecture. I completely stole everything other than the chorus. Okay, borrowed, but with the specific intent of referencing us back to the Tehillim.
Right.
And also referencing us, those who know this song, understand its power at a Shalashudis, at a Malava Malka.
It's a banging on the table, raucous, joyful, looking up. And you know what it makes me think of? The Rabbi Akiva laughing, 4 rabbis going together to see the destruction of the temple and seeing a fox run out. And whilst the other rabbis are crying at the destruction, Rabbi Akiva is laughing.
Yeah.
And that is
that one.
Right. And that's the Kiva Moed bit. It's the why you laugh. We're crying because he can't understand why they're crying. We're crying because it's destroyed and it's terrible. And he's laughing because he knows the second half of the story, the second half of whatever you want to call it, the prophecy, the story, or the story of our people, which is we will rebuild. It will be better. And I thought about that in the Kiva Moed bit of the psalm. And I thought that about in your text. There's laughs, I assume laughs among the ruins was literally about that. Maybe I was, okay, I didn't want to overread in it. And I thought, right, so hold on a minute. There's, charred bones and there's blood and, God's fainting. Oh my God, what? This is so, someone's getting arrested and we're worried about, hold on, there's laughs amongst the ruins. It will be okay. It will be okay. And I was thinking, what gives the person here? I know what gives Rabbi Akiva that thought and that comfort. He's a believer. Right? Akiva the believer, right? He Akiva is not just a believer, but is so trusting the God, the Hashem, the Kodesh Baruch Hu will sort this out. We will be built again. We will be right again. We will be whole again. There's no doubt. And in our Jewish tradition, we have a real love and fondness for those who didn't have a doubt. But what about this person here? I wasn't assuming this is a believing religious person. I was assuming, I made my own interpretation, not assume that, as an interpretation was, this is a person who is comforted by community. What do I mean by that? It's that image in my mind of every time I've been to a demonstration or a protest. It's never a singular thing. It's never going alone. It's always something where you are with people, shoulder to shoulder, arm in arm, where you're sharing a common concern, which is why you're protesting. Right? Whatever the thing is, protesting against war or protesting because of the environment, whatever, you share that in common and you're finding a community of people with a like-minded interest that are putting themselves out there. And I always have that belief, and sometimes I know it's naive. I've marched against certain wars and the wars happened anyway, right? I know that my protest doesn't always get the result I want, but I have hope in humanity where I'm laughing amongst the ruins is because of my hope and my joy and my optimism in my fellow humans that are standing alongside me. Because there will always be enough of us who won't just accept things, who won't just be bystanders, who will be upstanders, who will join together. And I'm a community person. That's my thing, right? Always have been, always will be. Worked in the community, worked for the community, worked with the community, love being part of community. And this made me think, okay, the laughs among the ruins, it'll be okay. Yeah, I'd be standing there going, it'll be okay because look at us. We're protesting. Right. And you know what? And Jane Fonda's putting her neck on the line and us, and we are. So there's that bit of hope there, even amongst protests. And actually, and the other bit I thought of is every time I've been on any of these things, and I was thinking of the most recent one, I love the signs that have humor. Yeah. Those signs that have humor that make me laugh. I've been to very serious demonstrations and had fun at points in it. I have laughed with people because that's kept our spirits up. So literally in those dark moments, finding a way to laugh and smile and have hope and faith.
The laughter bit, look, that's something that we all connect. It's a level we all connect on. Now, Shari will regularly remind me that she's tired of my humor and doesn't always find it funny, but she recognizes when something is funny, even if she's annoyed. And I'm a punster, I'm a word player.
Yeah.
The people in my law firm, there are some who will still laugh out loud, but there are some who they're in the eye-rolling phase. It's something that connects us even as you're structurally being rejected.
Absolutely.
Right? And I think that's also true of the merely standing up, right? You go to the march by standing up. Right. You're already connected. You see each other. All you have to do is just choose to open your eyes, an introvert / extrovert. I do really well in big groups. I do really poorly after a while and need alone time, which is why Linda Fife, my kind of co-founder of Limud LA, would be like, where the heck were you?
Right.
I just needed 15 minutes alone to gather energy.
Yeah. Recharge the batteries in a bit of peace and quiet.
Exactly. You didn't think that the speaker in the song was religious? I think you're right. The first line or the second verse.
Is it the prayer dries up like blood in the rain?
Yeah.
God faints. That's powerful.
I think the intent of those lines is to talk about the speaker's ambivalence about God, right? And it's similar to what you were saying. You'd say Tehillim Psalms when someone was sick or when we're in crisis, not thinking that the recitation of Tehillim was going to necessarily change anything in God, who would then go ahead and change things in the universe. I think the speaker is saying there's a pointlessness to prayer. It dries up like blood and the rain. Even while that happens, God is looking at the crap that's going on down here and faints. God, or the speaker, I think it has to be God, but it's also the speaker, ultimately laughs among the ruins.
Right.
The kind of prize comes in the last verse, because God, pours forth her troubled day. We specifically chose to make God female in this context. So again, today I might make God non-binary, but I think in this particular story, female is more powerful. Sees girls lugging jugs of water. It's the young women doing the work.
Yeah.
And God laughs among the ruins and says, it'll be okay. Then we go to the last verse. Ashes and tears drunk from, it's at the end of the bridge. Girls will solve the Goldbach conjecture, which is a complex mathematical equation.
The most famous unsolved, unproven mathematical equation. So much so that even I've heard of it, and maths is not my pet subject, but even I know, and you've got I don't know if it was the girls that are also lugging the jugs of water that are the same girls that are going to solve it.
On some level, it doesn't matter. The point of the song, I think, as we wrote it, if we are now moving towards a dismantlement of the traditional patriarchy into a world where women have a voice, perhaps the dominant voice, but at least where women are fully treated as equals, we will solve the Goldbach conjecture. And if we can solve that, we can solve the climate change problem.
And I thought maybe it was too literal a reading on my part. That probably because from early on I was thinking of Greta Thunberg, right? Probably from the title when I saw Fire Drill. I was thinking, these girls are Greta Thunberg,
right?
They're the ones who are lugging the jugs of water. Why they're lugging is, they're schlepping. It's hard work, right? They're not daintily carrying, they're lugging. Why? Because they're putting out the fire that is consuming the planet. That was what I was thinking. That was the image in my mind. And the same when it was why I was thinking, why girls, not women? Not females, but girls. When I think girls, I only think of children, right? I think that's what we mean. And Greta Thunberg's a child, or has been.
Yeah.
I mean, she's maybe less of a child now, but when she started this whole protest, this was a child's voice, and not just a child, a female child, a girl. So one of the kind of least enfranchised, least powerful groups in society, young girls, right? And one of the most vulnerable groups in society. And it's these girls, these Greta Thunbergs, that are they're lugging, they're doing the hard work, the schlepping, and they're doing the brain work, solving the previously unsolvable for whatever it is, a couple of 100 years, mathematical formula. And the image in my mind was literally Greta Thunberg's face. That was what I just had in my mind.
I'm looking at this to see whether, looking at my notes, which I shared up here, it's possible that someone mentioned Greta.
Right.
Back in 2020, we certainly all knew about her work by then, but I think the overall gist of it was girls, it's not going to happen today. This is a long-term process. So today's girls will be the women who solve the issue tomorrow.
I see.
It's about, and look, it could be wrong, but at the end of the day, our perspective, as I interpreted it, and I want to talk about that in a minute, was we have work to do, and it has to start when we're all very young, and we have to do our best to train each generation in a way that allows us to create this future. I think that's what's going on there. But Greta Thunberg is a perfect representation of that.
Yes. Is there an aspect there in what you said of the kind of lo alecha hamlacha ligmor? It's not incumbent upon you to finish the task, nor are you free to desist from engaging in it. Right?
Yeah.
But the same. There is no way that we can, in a short term, that any individual is going to solve the climate crisis. And I think that's, by the way, because it's such a huge thing, that's why so many people are still disengaged with it. It feels so big, so unfathomable, and you know what? The world's not going to burn down in my lifetime kind of thing. But actually, despite the fact that we're not going to be able to finish the task, if we don't start it, we are not allowed to refrain from being involved in it, in saving the world's problems now. Even if it's our children's children, if it's the daughters of our daughters of our daughters, these girls, if they're the ones who finally solve it, it will be because of everything we've done now.
Yep, I think that's exactly right. We've taken what I think is ultimately intended to be a heart song, and we're using our heads to analyze it, and with very good reason, in particular because there were 20 some odd Limudniks who participated in this. And the way I managed it was I presented the Tehillim, or the excerpts from the Tehillim. I asked people what the basic theme was: hope for, turn to God even in your most desperate moments. Sins yield death and destruction. That was the central metaphor. And I then asked people to tell us stories about their hope despite the odds, or despite making a terrible mistake. Again, because we had 50 minutes to do all of this.
Wow.
Well, I got 2 stories. One woman, sadly, I didn't write her name. I didn't think to do that in the moment. Was talking about, again, this is her language: desecrated the environment. Consumer greed has taken away nature too much. Sounds like timber. I asked a question. I said, what does that sound like? Filling the atmosphere with pollution, heating up plants. This is the key. Hope came from standing on the deck of a boat, seeing the wind turbine creating clean energy, protecting whales, fish, and people. Right? So that makes its way into the song somewhere. Yep. She also said, golden calf of consumer greed. And by the way, some of this may have been people's comments about this, but I picked the key language. Simplicity of wandering the wilderness gives hope and healing. Okay, that didn't make it into the song. But this same woman said, I got arrested with Jane Fonda.
Oh, wow.
If an 80-plus-year-old could get arrested, so can I. Put on my red coat like Jane. Women carry most of the water, and so on. So most of that made its way into the song. The next story was similar because it was similar. It was about my parents think global warming is a hoax. Hope in science made its way in there via the Goldbach conjecture. I took everyone's reactions to the song, and then I explained Cut Up. Right? T.S. Eliot, Kurt Cobain, William Burroughs, Tom York, David Bowie, Rimbaud. I explained specifically Burroughs' cut-up technique, dividing your text into 4 quadrants. We took the language from the Tehillim specifically and divided it into 4 and selected language from there. The appointed time is coming. That makes its way into the bridge. And then we did similar things by using the stories that people told. And then that's how we landed with the song itself. So this one I served, if you will, as an editor and shaper. I took our traditional text, cut it up, and found good language in it, and I connected that to the good language that people shared. And then I facilitated conversation. Should it go here? Should it go there? I helped shape it. So this is not my song per se. This is the song I wrote with 20 other people. And in that way, it ties back to your comment about being a community person.
I was literally just about to say, I love how the process of writing it is a great example of this message that I took from it, which is about, we can do this together.
Yeah.
We can do it. And I would say, and we can only do this together, which is my take on it. But that you couldn't have got this exact song in this order without that group of people doing it together.
Correct. It would have been a whole other song.
You could have written a fantastic song inspired by this song. There's no question about that. And some of the other guests you've had on this series could have done so. I couldn't. I can't write a song. But this group of people, only working together as a community, could have come up with this. And that's powerful.
The most powerful thing for me in that is that my relationship with community has always been there. Back from, when I was in high school and I was running Irgun Rim, the youth group for the Young Israel of Far Rockaway. As a high schooler, I was like the high school president.
Right.
So I've always been active in community, but Limud changed my relationship to how one builds community. Right. And, of course, Shosh Bloom introduced me to Priya Parker, and now that changed my relationship to it again. Not that it's different, but it's the language and the processes that change. And the principle behind this podcast started with just doing something lishma. I started writing the songs because I love writing music. and I love studying our texts, even Tehillim. And there's other aspects to the story, but I just started writing and, I would share it with my rabbi friends because my rabbi friends who loved music, because I said, you'll find this interesting. And they all had the same reaction. Each one of these is a shiur. You should give classes. And I'm like, I've done the teaching rabbis thing. When I teach bar and bat mitzvah students, the next generation, right? Yes, it's intended to get to your heart, but it's a head exercise.
Right.
And I just wanted to do something that was heart. Because to me, Tehillim is all heart. Yes, there's head in it, but it's all heart. So being able to take this lishma,
like doing it for the sake of doing it, just for its own sake.
Just doesn't sound as good in English.
No, I know.
Doing it for the sake of doing it, plus getting the benefits of studying with the text. Now that's, okay, so it's me and the text, and the output is the song, but I felt like there was a piece of the triangle missing, and that's why I started doing a lot of co-writes on this, because now I'm not, when you encounter the text, you encounter God. When you encounter other humans, you encounter God, right? It's Pirkei Avos, the ethics of our ancestors. What is it? Shnayim sheyoshvin or ochlan, I don't remember, or sitting together. If ein bahem divrei Torah, and if they don't speak words of Torah, God's wisdom, it's as if they were making zivchei mesim, sacrifices to the dead. But shnayim sheyesh bahem divrei Torah, two who have words of Torah, God's wisdom between them, not necessarily the 5 books of Moses.
Right.
Hashchina shruya beinehem. Yeah. The divine presence is partnered with them. And so having these conversations, to me, yes, we are 6,000 miles apart. Is that about right?
Yeah.
We're 6,000 miles apart, and it's Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and microphones connecting us.
Different time zones.
And perhaps all of that is the Shekhinah partnering with us, God's divine presence. And I'm specifically in the context of this song, the Shekhinah is God's divine feminine presence. And that's ultimately what led me to say, okay, well, if I'm creating this triangle where it's me in the text and another human being to get God in the center, okay, maybe I should just get over my own fear and just put this out to the world by having conversations with people about this. And people learn what they learn, as long as it's all learning for the sake of something greater than ourselves or for the sake of heaven, which brings us back to Limud again. Honestly, I manage my law firm based on Limud principles.
Really?
Yeah. Wow. It's fascinating.
Wait, you mean all of your staff are volunteers? No, I'm joking. No, I get it. Core values and principles of actually any really good community organization, and Limud is one of our favorite examples, should be run on the basis of values and principles. Whether they are the thing that is stuck on the website or is just the things that are the language between you all. And those should provide us with values and principles for living. And I learned that, by the way, I learned that and my love of being part of community from the age of around 12, 13. It was like kind of bar mitzvah year when I joined the local Jewish youth club, which was part of the local Jewish Youth and Community Center in a place called Redbridge, the Jerusalem of Europe, I'm going to call it, in kind of East London, Essex, that kind of border, and mostly because of one youth worker. They were called youth leaders before we got to the years where we called the madrasim, using the Hebrew term for leaders. They were just the youth workers, and particular one person whose name is David Goldberg, who still works in the community to this day. He's very involved in the kind of fundraising in the Jewish community. But he and a group of others who, looking back, would have only been probably 18 themselves, 19, who I thought were, proper grown-ups.
Right.
And it's only when we became colleagues many years later, when we became friends and colleagues, that there's no real age difference. But they ran this whole thing on principles and values. They were trying to help develop us as a group of menches who loved community, loved doing things together. So everything was in group. Everything was in group. And it was all about the group experience. And again, quite the same, but a bit like Limud, a key part of that was going away together, what we would now call a Shabbaton, what we called then in those days for us, the weekend away. One of these, going to some rundown kind of hostel type building.
Hostel, Hostel, or Hostile?
Oh, no. Well, occasionally in some parts of the country, but no, these kind of very cheap kind of places with dorms and bunk beds. And it's probably the first place where I actually even heard that Kiva Moed, most likely. But it was the first place, and I remember this so distinctly, it's relevant to this. I went along, age probably 13, on my first one of these things, these weekend aways. In fact, they had a slogan. It was called EBJ, Enjoy Being Jewish. That was the framework, right? This great youth worker and educator and his peers. And I went away, and a bunch of them were like my friends, the boys I played football with, the girls I wanted to kind of dance with at a school disco, a club disco. That's kind of why I went. I didn't go because I wanted to immerse myself in Jewish education and community. I went because, this is what you did and had fun and made friends. And I saw a bunch of the boys that I didn't really think had these strong Jewish identities in particular. I knew them on the football pitch. And then after the meal on the Friday night, these laminated, I think they were yellow, A4 sheets were passed round, and there was this thing on it that everyone called benching. I didn't know what this was, right? I grew up in an engaged Jewish house, a liberal Jewish house. I'd never come across this. I was too young to have gone to any weddings or anything and seen it there. We didn't do it at home. No other family members I knew did. And suddenly there was this raucous, like on camp, right? That raucous way of doing grace after meals, as some people would call it, the blessings after meals, Birkat Hamazon, as we would call it now. But it was these kids that weren't religious. God had never come up in a conversation with them. They went for the same reason I went for, right? To have fun and play sports and go to disco. And they were joining in this joyful Judaism, banging on tables and singing. And they knew the movements, the hand movements and the things and I was swept up in it, 12, 13 years old, swept up in it. And it was a combination of the two things, the joyous Judaism. It was enjoy being Jewish, and the community aspect. That wasn't a thing you could do with two people or one person. That was a thing you did because there were 30 or 40 of us in one room around the tables, banging on the tables or singing. And you get caught up in the group dynamic of it all. And all of those pulot, all of those activities, educational activities we did were the group experience, the community experience was part of it. And to come full circle, like 2 days ago, I picked my kids up after being away. They were both away for 2 weeks on Machane, on summer camp. They went this year with Habon and Dor. Youth movement's still, pretty strong in the UK.
Strong here too.
Every bit of experience that they loved involved being with other people. It was what they did together. And it was something that, as far as they know, I can't understand it because I wasn't there. I wasn't part of that community. I wasn't part of that. As Helene, my wife, kept saying to them, that activity, your Abba probably wrote that 20 years ago. Or he taught it to the Madrachim, But it was the community they built and the friendships they built, and they went through the educational experience in a group, in a community, and they had each other, and that they could laugh amongst the ruins on things now, right? Because they're together and they've got their group, and they had that experience, and it was joyful and it was together. And that feels, again, your experience of Limud, my experience of Limud, your experience of doing this process, and actually some of the meaning and the words in this fantastic community-built, group-built song. I think those things all fit together to me.
Yeah, 1,000%. You've hit the key. Again, for me, it ties back to the principles and values. If you don't focus on the principles and values, you can't find the joy. And if you can't find the joy, it won't lead you to the principles and values. So they're deeply bound. So I think that's the space that we invite God in when you are seeking joy through principles and values. And honestly, the reason governments are as unproductive as they are is because they set aside principles and values that are focused on the wider community and instead focus on their community, Republicans and Democrats.
Constituents, yeah.
Exactly. If we could bring them back to truly principles and values based on Limud values, with respect for each other, with connection, with arguments that are for the sake of something greater than ourselves, then we might actually be able to balance a budget or not go through what we're going through in Florida right now. And perhaps someday today's girls will carry those jugs of water and by carrying them solve the Goldbach conjecture. Togetherness is divine.
Togetherness is divine.
Thank you so, so much for having this conversation with me, Raymond. I love your wisdom, your smile, your attitude, and can't wait to write a song with you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for listening. Special thanks to Raymond for joining me, to Sean Kawanami and Luca Feliz for their help producing the song, to Emil Stern for his help producing the episode, to E-Rose for his help producing the song and the episode, to Jessica Hanna Sweetler for her help on social media, to Liat Silvera for designing the podcast logo, to my wife Shari, who did her fair share of Jane Fonda workouts back in the day, and we're wishing her a refuah shlema, a complete recovery so she can get back to exercising after her knee replacement surgery. Special thanks to all of you who've been helping out in the wake of that surgery. You can find Fire Drill Fridays and all the other songs in this song cycle on most platforms that stream or download music, including Spotify and Apple and YouTube. Now for the shameless self-promotion bit. Again, it really helps if you share the episodes and songs, and if you like, comment, and subscribe to the podcast, and to me as an artist on your favorite platforms. And while we're at it, check out E-Rose's new single, Waves, which you can find wherever you watch or listen to music. In the next episode of The Rest is Commentary, I'll be talking with John Madoff, phenomenal New York guitarist, composer, producer, and band leader, best known for his bands Zion 80 and Rashanim, and his hypnotic mix of avant-garde jazz, post-punk, East African groove, and Jewish themes. John's latest album, Turn of Events, was recorded with his trio live and is set to be released on Tzaddik Records on August 14th, 2026. You can find it wherever music is streamed or sold. You can learn more about John and get his touring schedule at www.johnmadoff.com. John and I talk about the role of rhythm and lyrics in songwriting, spirituality, Jewish identity, and jazz, Jewish musical traditions and spiritual practices, musical and spiritual growth, playing what you're meant to play, halacha as a dynamic process, the tension between serving yourself and serving your audience, and so much more. All inspired by John's thoughts after listening to Angels Do My Bidding, which was inspired by Psalms 54, 103, and more. The song is a teaser from my upcoming EP, which was started in a Shana in a Dress song sprint and will be released in Q3 of 2026. It's a hero's journey song cycle shaped by the stories of King David and stories from October 7th with a spiritual, not factual, focus on figures like Daniel and Neria Sharabi, General Noam Tibon, and Ishmael al-Kramwani and his family. Please join us.